Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today as we talk about Medicare. We've got a great webinar in store for you. And before we jump right on in, I'd like to go ahead and just share with you some introductions. My name is Dave Reagan. I'm the president of Grunden Financial Advisory. And with us today, I'd like to introduce Paul Terrell. I'll look off to the side while I read his bio. Paul is an independent life and health insurance broker and has owned Terrell Insurance Services since 1989. He specializes in providing customer service and finding the right coverage for you, your family, and your business. While supporting his young family as a school teacher, Paul acquired his insurance license for extra income so his wife could stay home with their first child. What being a part-time endeavor eventually grew into becoming a full-time profession. Originally from Longview, Paul has made his home in North Texas since 1978. He and his wife were married in 1987. They have 3 grown children, 4 grandchildren, and another one coming due soon. So I am very excited to welcome Paul to join us today to talk about Medicare. A quick overview about Grunden Financial Advisory. You see our purpose and who we are and why we are here today. I love seeing and reviewing this every chance I get because wealth is more than just numbers. It carries a greater purpose. And today we're taking an aspect of that and trying to protect our wealth. And the best way to do that is with the appropriate insurance policies. So Medicare can be extremely overwhelming. And Paul has done a great job for many of our clients in helping to weed through the alphabet soup that the government has created, and they call it Medicare. So the goals from the session today are listed here. We hope to hit on 5 of them concisely, and at the conclusion of the presentation, we're able to open it up for some Q&A. So if you have questions, feel free to type them in, and at the end of the presentation, if we have enough time, we'll be able to hopefully address all of them. So with that introduction, I'm going to turn this over to Paul. All right, Paul.
Thank you, Dave, and welcome to all those who are tuning in today. Medicare is a very confusing subject. I know if you are anywhere close to Medicare age, you're probably getting bombarded by reams and reams of mail from all these different insurance companies, insurance agencies, advertisements. So hopefully today we can take a little bit of the mystery out of the Medicare maze and at least put you in a position where you feel like you've got a little bit of a handle on how to make the best decisions for you and your situation. And of course, we'll be available to help you with that down the line as needed. But just to start with an overview of the Medicare program itself, the federal government side, the law has been around a good while. It was signed into law in 1965 and then actually was ready to open the doors to Medicare beneficiaries in 1966. So it's been around long enough for doctors and hospitals. The whole medical community is really used to the way this works. And for the beneficiaries on Medicare, it's been very stable in terms of the way it works. So that's a good thing that it's been around a while. They're not still working the bugs out of it. One reason we're doing this today is that Medicare itself, if all you had were the federal government parts, Medicare does not pay 100% of medical costs. There are deductibles, co-pays, co-insurance. That means where the insurance company pays part and you pay part, like 80-20, 70-30, that sort of thing. Those are expenses that you are responsible for. And with Medicare alone, if that's all you had, you would have no limit on how high your out-of-pocket expenses could go. It never goes to 100% coverage. So that's why it's good to have some sort of a supplement, and we'll talk about those later on, but there are several ways you can supplement Medicare. So there are 4 parts to the Medicare system, and we'll start with Part A. They go A, B, C, D, so that's easy to remember. Part A is called hospital coverage. Now, it does cover some things besides hospital, things like hospice and some other things, but the biggest part of it, I think, is hospital coverage. So that's a good way to think of it. Part A of Medicare is hospital coverage. Medicare Part A primarily covers the hospitalization costs. And although you do have a deductible, there is a deductible on Part A that you would be responsible for if you don't have a supplement. So if you want to think of Medicare Part A as primarily for hospital, that's a good way to think of it. Medicare Part A has no cost for most people that go on Medicare Part A. If you have had a normal working life, something like 10 years, and they don't even have to be 10 consecutive years, it's 40 quarters of work during which you were paying taxes into the Medicare system, which would be any kind of a normal job as an employee or even as a self-employed person, you pay into those Medicare taxes. So if you have done that for a total of 10 years over your working life, then you will pay zero for Part A. So most people pay nothing for Medicare Part A. That's the hospital part.
Got it. Paul, I'm going to ask you a question right there. What about spouses who may not have attained those quarters? Do they pay an extra amount?
No, if you are married and have a spouse who qualifies for no-cost Part A, then you also get Part A at no cost. So that's a good question and good to know.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul.
All right, so moving on to Part B of Medicare. That is just called medical, which is a very broad category, but it's all, think of it as outpatient coverage, basically. You have hospital covered under Part A, but then under Part B, you have pretty much everything else. So think doctor visits, lab work, outpatient testing, outpatient procedures and outpatient surgery. Even a lot of things like radiation and chemo these days are done on an outpatient basis. You're not in the hospital, admitted to the hospital. You go into the infusion center and take your radiation and chemo. So a lot falls under Medicare Part B. Hopefully, we all would rather use Part B, going in for checkups and that sort of thing, than Part A. So Part B gets a lot more usage than Part A, thankfully. Because of that, because it's a more costly thing for the federal government to run, because people use Part B more frequently, there is a cost to take Part B from the federal government. To get on Medicare Part B costs most people $185 a month. Now that is a 2025 number. That number is set by Medicare. The monthly premium for Part B is set by Medicare on an annual basis. Last year, for example, it was $174. So it usually goes up $5 or $10 a year, something like that, at least in the past. And every year in about fall, you will get a letter from Medicare saying what the Part B premium will be for the following year. So now this is not buying a Medicare supplement or a drug plan. This is just the fee that goes to the federal government, and the federal government actually bills you for this to be on Medicare. A Medicare supplement or a drug plan with a monthly cost, that would be in addition. But we're just talking about the cost of the federal government parts. Some people pay more than $185 a month for Medicare Part B. It's based on income. And again, this bracket is set by the federal government. It changes slightly every year. But in 2025, if you're on Medicare or if you're going on Medicare and your income as a single person, single tax filer, is $106,000 or higher, or if you're filing jointly, if that adjusted gross income is $212,000 or higher, you will pay more for Medicare Part B. And it's sort of like a tax bracket. You know, if you make between 106 and this amount, you pay this much for Part B. And if you bump up higher than that, you'll pay more for Part B. And there's 3 or 4 brackets there. I believe the highest bracket is something like $500 or $600 a month that you would pay for Medicare Part B.
Wow, that's a steep penalty. Yeah, this is also something to be aware for those that may be considering supercharging Roth conversions. Like, take it one step further and look at, well, if I do perform this Roth conversion, will it impact my Medicare premiums? So thanks for bringing this up because this is very pertinent and sometimes overlooked if you're just solely focused for somebody doing Roth conversions on the federal income taxation.
That's right. It's actually quite common for people to sell a piece of property during a year and jump up into a higher bracket for the Part B cost just because of selling a house or selling a piece of property. It is good to know, though, that is calculated on a year-to-year basis. So just because it jumps up 1 year because of a Roth conversion or a sale of a property or something else, that will be recalculated every year. Most people, I would say, over time, eventually get back down to that standard amount, which would be $185. So you're not going to pay more forever unless your income stays high forever.
All right, great.
Talking about that Medicare Part B premium, the $185 for most people, if you are already receiving a Social Security check or will be in 2025 or whatever point in the future, the federal government's not even going to give you a chance to forget to send that in. They're going to automatically take it out of your Social Security check. So that's kind of nice. You really never see the money. You sort of don't feel it as badly as having to write that check. But if you're not receiving Social Security, then the federal government will bill you. And you can either set that up by mail, or the default method is by mail, which is a quarterly bill. So you got to pay 3 times that monthly amount every quarter. Or what most people prefer is to set it up on a bank draft. And that way it's just a monthly automatic draft of the Part B premium.
Excellent. That was Part B. Part C's next. Take it away.
That's right. Going down the alphabet here. Part C is the entire Medicare Advantage system. Now, we're going to talk about that more later on, but in the 90s, the federal government basically partnered with private insurance companies to offer their version of a Medicare plan, and we'll talk about that when we get to the Medicare Advantage plans. But that's the Part C of Medicare, is the Medicare Advantage program.
Yeah, and Part C is, correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, but Part C is where all the decisions come in. Part A, you're going to get. Part B, you're going to get. And then decisions come in.
That's right. Although if you don't do an Advantage plan, you really won't ever have Part C. But Part C is a big part of the decision-making process, and that's the biggest confusing point, which we'll get to on our comparison here shortly.
All right.
It's interesting to think that for decades, literally 50 years, or 40, is that 40 or 50, from 66 to 06, there was no drug coverage in Medicare. And this was not an oversight. Think back to 1966, those of you who can remember back that far. None of these fancy drugs were around. The only treatment for diabetes was insulin. You remember the old saying, you go to the doctor and he would say, take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning. Penicillin, I know they had penicillin back then, but all the wonder drugs, the drugs for diabetes, for cholesterol, for blood pressure, and 1,000 other drugs, these literally did not exist when Medicare went into effect. And so the federal government folks that worked on this program thought, do we need drug coverage? No, we don't need any drug coverage in this thing. Penicillin is very inexpensive. Well, over the years, some of these drugs began to be discovered and put on the market, and they're wonderful and they're very helpful to a lot of us, but some of them are very expensive. So senior citizens, those on Medicare, began to, shall we say, make these thoughts known somewhere in the 90s and clamor for prescription drug coverage. And it was a long process, but eventually in 2006, Part D of Medicare came into being, and now there is prescription drug coverage under the Medicare program. Part D just happened to be the next letter in the alphabet after Part C, the Medicare Advantage program. But if you want to remember D for drugs, that's a good way to remember it. So the Part D program is prescription drug coverage in Medicare.
All right. Excellent. So there's A, B, C, and D. Now we'll transition to Medicare Supplement or Advantage.
This is the biggest source of confusion, I think, because you may have a next door neighbor who tells you this thing, and somebody at church tells you this thing, and some ad comes on television and says, ask about our zero cost Medicare plans. And you're scratching your head thinking, wait, zero cost. What's the catch? There is no such thing as zero monthly cost. And then other plans might cost, $100, $150, $200 a month. So this is the biggest area of confusion. And hopefully we can clear up some of these questions here just by putting them side to side with pros and cons. So as you can see on the left side of your screen there is the Medicare supplement. This is one way to supplement Medicare. Remember those gaps that I talked about, the deductibles, the copays, the out-of-pocket expenses? About half of Medicare beneficiaries nationwide elect to go with the left side of the screen here, which is a Medicare supplement. It's also called Medigap insurance because it's designed to fill in those gaps. And you can think of this one as paying upfront. You're going to pay a monthly premium to fill in the gaps even before anything has happened. So let's look at some pros of the Medicare supplement side. If you decide to go down this road, as a matter of fact, you can think of this as a fork in the road. You cannot do both. You would not need to do both. You choose. It's kind of like the scarecrow on The Wizard of Oz. You can go this way or you can go that way, but you can't go both ways. The scarecrow might have been able to somehow, but we can't. So you're going to look at either the left side or the right side. Well, the pros on the Medicare supplement side, if you choose a Medicare supplement and go with Plan G, which is the most popular Medicare supplement, then it drastically lowers your out-of-pocket risk. If something major were to happen, a serious accident, a serious illness, ongoing chronic treatment of some kind, your total out-of-pocket for the year for medical expenses would be $257 for 2025. That is, you could go in and have $500,000, and I've seen claims like this with strokes, heart attacks, very serious, chronic, ongoing things, and the person owes a couple of $100 when all is said and done. Nothing more out of pocket for the rest of that year for surgery, hospitalization. It's a very low risk, very low out-of-pocket amount there. Now, this does not include prescriptions. That's a separate thing with Medicare Part D, the drug plan. But for all the normal medical expenses, your out-of-pocket risk is very low. That is a huge pro on the Medicare supplement side. The second bullet point there says freedom of choice. The vast majority of doctors in the country, way up in the high 90 percentile, over, I think it's like 98%, something like that. You can go to any provider in the United States, as long as they work with Medicare, which most of them do. Whether you're traveling, you're in Florida, you're in New York, you're in California, you're in Texas, wherever you are, you can go to any doctor that works with Medicare. There's no HMO. There's not even a PPO network to worry about. It is just wide open freedom of choice for doctors that work with Medicare. So that is a big factor in a lot of people's minds. I know for myself and my wife, if something serious were to happen, if we were to be diagnosed with something very serious, you think cancer, heart problems, any kind of long-term or ongoing or serious accident or illness, we would want to be able to go anywhere in the country that had the best care. And so that's a factor in this choice for a lot of people. Another good thing is that when you first go on Medicare, you don't have to answer any health questions to go on a Medicare supplement. So you can pick anyone you want from any company you want, and they cannot turn you down. They have to welcome you with open arms, or at least they have to accept your premium and put you on that Medicare plan. So no health questions when you're first eligible for Medicare. There are some negatives, or just things to consider. They're not really negatives. As with all insurance, there are trade-offs. But if you choose to go this route with a Medicare supplement, you're going to pay a monthly premium. Remember I said up at the top, it's pay up front. So you're going to pay a monthly premium just like you do with your car insurance. I pay my car insurance every month, whether I have a wreck or not. I'm paying up front for my car insurance so that it's there if something happens. Well, that's the way it is with a Medicare supplement. You're going to pay a monthly cost of between roughly $100 and $200 a month, depending on the plan you choose. And that is per person. So if you have two people doing Medicare and doing a Medicare supplement, you would each have that Medicare supplement premium to pay. Then the Part D drug coverage is a separate thing from the Medicare supplement. So now you have to purchase your prescription drug coverage separately. Now, believe it or not, there are Medicare prescription drug plans that cost as little as $0, and then some cost as much as $100 a month or more. That is dependent on what drugs you take. And if you decide to check into this more, and if I were going to provide you with quotes on these things, I would get a list of your medications so I could quote you what your drug plan would cost to have the best coverage for those prescriptions. But if you take mainly low-cost generics, so cholesterol meds, blood pressure meds, even the oral meds for diabetes, things like that, things that are on the $3 list at Walmart or just very inexpensive generic drugs, you may very well have $0 monthly cost or $10 or $20 a month for your drug plan. Usually to be up in that $100 a month range, it's for people that are taking really expensive drugs like Eliquis as a blood thinner or Ozempic. A lot of the very new diabetes drugs are really, really high. So sometimes it makes sense to pay more for that drug plan so you can get lower cost at the pharmacy. You are going to get some sort of a rate increase annually, as the next bullet point says there. So every year you can expect your Medicare supplement to go up, and usually your drug plan will go up as well, although that's usually by a smaller amount because it's a smaller premium. You hope to see that Medicare supplement increase stay in the 5 to 10% range. That's ideal. And I have certain companies that do that better than others, so we could talk about that if you wanted to drill down on a personal call at some point. But just know that, like most insurance, you're going to get some kind of a rate increase every year.
This is great. I see what you mean, Paul, about paying upfront, because if you start adding everything together, $185 for Part B plus the Medigap, maybe you're at $350 for a drug plan. That could be $350 a person, $700 a month for a retiree who's married. So that's interesting, and I like how you framed that about paying up front, and should tee us up well to look at the Medicare advantages. And I'm interested to learn more about the pay-as-you-go and how that compares and contrasts.
Yes, and just before we jump over to that side, it's okay to leave that up, but let me finish the last couple of bullet points down on the bottom there.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
If you were to ever want to change from one Medicare supplement to another, at that point you do have to answer health questions, and some people will not qualify, particularly because of things like heart attack, stroke, cancer, some kind of chronic long-term health problem. So that's a good reason to try to get one, a good one with a good company on the front end, so that ideally you never have to change it. And again, I could advise you the companies that I've had better luck with than others in that regard. But you can change as long as you're healthy. You can change from one Medicare supplement to another. It's good to keep in mind that with regular Medicare, routine dental, vision, and hearing are not covered. So when I say routine dental, I mean just checkups, exam, x-rays, normal things like crowns and dentures and all those things. Medicare, the federal government made the decision not to cover those things in the beginning. And so if Medicare doesn't cover it, then neither does the supplement. So if you go the Medicare supplement route and you want coverage for routine dental, vision, or hearing expenses, those would be separate purchases that you could make outside of the Medicare system. All right. So after those pros and cons, we get to the other fork in the road, and this is Medicare Advantage. Remember, that is Part C of Medicare, and I call this pay as you go. So instead of paying up front, now you're going to only pay as you go if you decide to go this route. Well, there are some definite pros to this approach. And the first one that usually gets people's attention is that most of the Medicare Advantage plans have no monthly premium. The reason you can have a $0 monthly cost health plan like a Medicare Advantage plan is that somebody is paying.
Yeah.
So in this case, it is the federal government that is subsidizing Medicare. There are literally hundreds of billions of dollars flowing into the insurance companies from the Medicare side. Well, now, why would the federal government do that? Why wouldn't they just keep control of it all themselves? Well, that's what they did for those first decades, and the costs were really getting high, and plus people were living longer, and the federal government decided to take a look at allowing the private insurance companies to come in and take some of the pressure off the main Medicare system. So the federal government figures out an amount of money that they can pay to the insurance companies and still come out ahead. They know how much it costs. They can take the total cost of Medicare and divide it by the number of people that are on there and come up with a monthly cost for what it costs the federal government to have people on Medicare. And they can go below that number and pay that money to the insurance company. Now the insurance company takes that money, designs their Medicare plan. It has to meet all the federal guidelines. They can't just do anything they want. They have to jump through a million hoops. But now the Medicare Advantage plan, the insurance company, is getting money from the federal government, so they turn around to you and don't have to charge you a monthly premium. So everybody's happy. Uncle Sam's getting a little bit lower cost per person. The insurance companies have lots of money coming in to design a plan, and you, if you choose to go this way, get a Medicare Advantage plan, and you literally pay zero for it. On top of that, your drug plan, remember the Part D coverage that you would normally have to pay for over on the left side? Well, with Medicare Advantage, drug coverage is included. So now you have not only the health part that's zero monthly cost, but you have the drug part that is no monthly cost. You also get some extra benefits: dental, vision, hearing. Many of the plans have fitness memberships where you can go to a local gym and pay nothing. It varies from plan to plan, but over the years, the Advantage plans figured out ways that they could save a little money over on the medical side. Maybe, let's say they make their doctor's office copay a little bit higher, and that frees up some money for them to build in some of these other benefits into those plans. So on the Medicare Advantage side, you normally get dental, vision. Many of them have hearing. I would say most of them have some sort of fitness membership, and you're getting this at no monthly cost. The final pro there is, and this is a big thing for some, Medicare Advantage, just because there are so many millions of people on these plans, they literally do not ask a single health question. You can always go on Medicare Advantage. They will not turn you down. There's no problems with pre-existing. So if someone already has some serious medical problems and wants to go into a Medicare Advantage plan, you can do that. You would have to wait till January 1st of a given year, but never any health questions with Medicare Advantage, even when you change from one company to another. So those are some pretty significant pros there. What are the cons to consider? Well, to make this work on a Medicare Advantage plan, the insurance companies really need to have the provider networks like an HMO or a PPO. So remember, over on the left side of the fork there, you didn't have an HMO or a PPO. As long as someone works with Medicare, you could go anywhere you wanted. Mm-hmm. Well, on a Medicare Advantage plan, you're going to have a network of some kind. Now, I generally recommend PPO over the HMO because you do have freedom of choice to go out of the network. With an HMO, you cannot go out of the network unless it's a true life or limb type of emergency. Some people say, oh, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to have a network. I don't want the insurance company tell me what doctors I can go to. Other people say, hey, we've always had an HMO. We've always had a PPO. So let's just look at the doctors. But that's not a big deal to us because we've never not had some sort of a network to worry about. So that's something to keep in mind on the Medicare Advantage side. Also, remember over on the left side, your maximum out of pocket was going to be a couple $100s for the year. Well, that would be really nice if you could pay zero for an Advantage plan and still have a couple of $100 maximum out of pocket, but that's not the way that it works. You are going to have copays now for all non-preventive services. Remember, I said this is pay as you go. So you're paying zero per month, but now you're going to have copays. So doctor visits, outpatient surgery, hospital stay, you're going to have copays. You will have an out-of-pocket maximum of usually something like $6,000 to $8,000. So there is a cap on it, but notice that's quite a bit more than the $257 over on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
But if you stay in very good health, then you're not going to see any of that or very little of that. You'll just have small copays like doctor visits. So that's why we call it pay as you go. You only pay if something happens. HMOs do usually require a formal referral to see a specialist, which is another hoop to jump through on an HMO. So I would steer you usually toward a PPO, and that way you would not have to do that. But HMOs, you have to get that formal referral. And then there are some doctors out there who are not in network with any of the Advantage plans. So again, who your doctors are is a big factor, and I could help you explore those options if you were trying to make that choice. All right, well, let's just sum up here. Over on the left-hand side, you can see the summary down at the bottom for the Medicare supplement. You do have a higher monthly cost because you're paying up front, but now you have a very low out-of-pocket risk of a couple $100. You can use any Medicare provider anywhere in the country, and you do have to answer health questions when changing companies. On the right side, the summary for Medicare Advantage, you have that lower monthly cost, zero in most cases. But if something major happens, you are going to pay more out of pocket. Could be as high as $6,000 to $8,000. Just depends on what happens. You do have a network of providers, either HMO or PPO. You have those nice extras like dental, vision, hearing, fitness, and those cost zero. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. And then no health questions when changing. You could change from Medicare Supplement to Medicare Advantage, or from one Medicare Advantage to another Medicare Advantage plan and never have any health questions. So that is a good summary of those two options there.
Wow. Thank you, Paul. That's a lot. But this is also why we've got Medicare experts to help, like you, to help people walk through the different options and different choices. So now we'll open it up for any questions from the audience members. And I've got a few questions that I generated because I'm curious. I want to know, but love to hear from you guys. So if any of the participants have a question, feel free to type it in the question box, and we'll see if we can get those answered.